right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the RevOps Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Henderson, and I'm joined today, as usual, by Brandon Redlinger and Jonathan Stevens. I'm not even going to let you guys say hello because I'm far too excited to introduce our guest today, the CEO of Go Nimbly, Jen Igartua. Sorry, I totally butchered your last name. I'm so sorry for that. Igartua.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
I tried.
Yeah, it's from the Basque Country in Spain. We all have very hard to pronounce names, so you are forgiven.
Igartua, correct?
Igartua, yeah, like the word Garfield's in there. Igartua.
Yeah. See, I think what got me wrong is our producer Alex misspelled it in the name of the podcast right at the top, which totally threw me off a little bit. I practiced it and I totally got it wrong. It is 1,000% Alex's fault. But Jen, I'm super excited to have you here. So Jen is the CEO of Go Nimbly, which is the first revenue operations consultancy, which y'all have more business than you know what to do with right now, which is amazing. You're a game maker at Pillbox, an improv enthusiast, and an all-around expert in marketing and sales alignment. So I got to start first. Game maker at Pillbox. Tell me about that. What is that about?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we did a Kickstarter, me and a few friends here in Brooklyn, for a company called game called Side Effects. And we did really well. We thought it was going to be just a little side hustle and just make a quick game. But we sold $80,000 worth on a Kickstarter campaign.
Ooh.
That led us to make more games. You can find us in kind of big retailers. I just saw myself in a Barnes & Noble in Union Square, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've got a distributor in games. We launched another one called Mud about a year and a half ago. And so, yeah, it's fun. I wanted to do B2C marketing. I was like, what is it like to sell an actual product when I'm selling
This is like a board game.
Yeah, it's a physical card game. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Card game. Nice.
Yeah. So it was kind of, I was interested in what's it like to sell a product versus a service or versus helping tech companies. And it is, I'm not a great B2C maker or product maker. I think I knew that when our publisher said that our game, from what it costs to make, was the most expensive card game that they've ever made. Everything they said, they were like, do you want to add gold lining to the cards for 12 cents? I was like, yes, 12 cents. No problem.
Duh.
It all adds up.
It's all about quality, you know?
100%. Add it all. It's only a couple cents more. And then you realize that your margin is abysmal. And, after 5 years of working together, I think we made $20,000 between 4 people. So not a cash maker, but very fun.
That's a good chunk of change.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it. Most people made games.
Well, you've made money making games, which is more. Also, if you want to practice your B2C marketing on Brandon, it took him about 45 seconds of you describing that to realize it was a card game. In his mind, I don't know what he was thinking that you'd made, but it took him a really long time. So if you want to know if your messaging is landing or not, he's your test audience. If you can tell it to him in 10 seconds or less, everybody will understand. Anyways, all right, it's totally off topic because this is not a podcast about board games, although fun idea if anybody wants to start one. I'm sure there are many of them. Go Nimbly. So it's the first RevOps consultancy, and I know you guys have had some let's call them copycats since then. There's been additional RevOps consultancies, but tell us about Go Nimbly and sort of your time there.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about being the first RevOps consultancy, we were the first to really latch onto that name, but we were doing it even beforehand. When we started Go Nimbly, we were doing sales operations work, we were doing marketing operations work, and we were dealing with all the pains that we know revenue operations attempts to solve. And we were calling it unifying the business stack. Like that was our tagline for a long time before we had the concept of revenue operations. So we understood that there was no change on one part of the funnel that didn't affect the other. And we were working hard to really at the beginning knock down those data and tech silos. And we were working on kind of smoothing that out, smoothing the tools and the integration points. And then we started playing in that people space. I do notice that a lot of the messaging out there in revenue operations is a lot about silos being to people. But for me, it's people, it's data, it's tools. It's, a lot of the times it's not malice that keeps us siloed. So, we then kind of moved. We heard revenue operations, I think 7 years ago, casually being mentioned. And we're like, that's us. That's what we do. We have a new name.
That's amazing. Yeah, I remember when the term came out, like, years back. I was at the time like the head of sales development, marketing operations, and sales operations at a company. I was like, so that's actually what I do, not whatever that jumbled mix of words was, right? But I think there was a lot of people in that camp that were, sort of trying to do those things and didn't really know what to call it yet. And you guys were consulting and doing it. And by the way, I love the focus on people as part of it and that there's no malice, because that's typically true, right? Like, everybody just wants to succeed at the end of the day. There's not any hatred defining these things. It's awesome. Cool. And then you just became the CEO last year?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you've been with the company for how long?
2015 to 16, around then.
Okay, yeah. So straight to the top. Look at you! Congrats, that's awesome.
Matter. Thank you very much. It's sometimes hard to celebrate when it's like somebody leaves and you take over your position, and it's you don't get that kind of celebratory, especially internally. It wasn't like, yay, Jen got promoted. It was like, what's going on? And so I didn't get a ton of an ability to like pause and celebrate that, like, it is a new role and it is really exciting for me. And I've had the chance to do that over the last few months. The transition of taking over a team, which people have at all different levels, is a lot of my peers became people that were rolling up to me. And I had to learn a lot of new things. For a long time, I was really, chief services officer, which meant that I was managing our entire services organization, which is pretty close to the full company. But I had to go from being, in the work to changing, and really, actually, I think a big part of leading is making other people successful. And, sometimes I miss my individual contributor role, but I do like it up here, so I think I'll stay.
Nice. Yeah, it is. I think it's making other people successful is sort of the sole job of leadership, right? Like, that is end all be all most important thing. But there are those days when you look back and you think, man, it'd be nice if I could just like put my head down, put my headphones in, and do some work for 8 hours and see how that goes.
Simpler problems,
Simpler times, right? Simpler times. And I don't have CEO problems like Jen does. I have Jonathan reports to me problems, which is a lot of problems. And so, but it actually brings up a thing that I think gives you a bit of a unique perspective, Jen, since you've been, like an IC all the way up to the CEO of a RevOps consultancy. So you've not only run RevOps presumably internally at your company. So I think it gives you a bit of a unique perspective, right? You've run RevOps internally, externally, at companies of all sorts of sizes. You've consulted for them, doing all sorts of different things. So I want to start with org setup. And I know you have really strong thoughts about org setup. We get a lot of questions about this and love their take. What does it take to start a RevOps team at sort of different business sizes?
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at the variables, right, like what does it mean to start RevOps at a company that doesn't have operations at all? What does it mean to have RevOps at a company that's been, aggressively siloed and have their sales ops, marketing ops, CS ops all rolling up to different teams and doing their own thing? And then what does it mean to have a RevOps team that is like maybe at a maturity point that needs to change their structure? So there's a lot of different things and a lot of different ways to apply this framework. I think ultimately you have to believe in the same revenue operations definition. And I think we're getting a little luckier that now in the sales cycles I'm having, it's a lot less like what's revenue operations and why should I implement it? It's definitely more of the how, which is better. Still internally for leadership, there's still a little bit of education, that goes on in the middle of it. But if we just assume that everybody wants to do this and we're gung-ho and we understand that, hey, we're here to knock down silos, we're here to create and prioritize a great customer experience, and, we're here to be unified. If you've got that down, if you don't, by all means, get on the same page, because what you don't want to do is wait for a while, because then when you're like halfway through the implementation of this team, someone's going to be like, why do you need this? And you're like right back to the start. So, get through that process, get alignment as I feel like such a cliche right now. Make sure your team's aligned.
Well, but it's a
process.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to break up though, right? Like, you could be cliche. Let's be cliche. Lean into it, whatever.
Then RevOps is a journey, Jordan. RevOps is a journey.
It's like, I'm going to put that below live, laugh, love on my wall. I just insulted so many basic people listening to this. I'm so sorry, everybody. Don't hate us. Please download the podcast. But I actually was talking to somebody today. It was a marketing ops consultant and really doing RevOps. The company she's at asked her to have the title marketing operations. Whatever, no big deal. But she got in. They were sort of what you're talking about. We were talking about the role 6 months ago when she was interviewing there, and I had her ask a bunch of questions around, like talk to the VP of sales, talk to the VP of marketing, figure out like, are they actually aligned? Do they have like any of this? Do you sense that they are actually aligned around needing you? And she did, and the feedback was very good. And then shortly after she started, they brought in a new head of marketing who is totally against all of these things. And it's problem time for her, obviously, right? So and when she asked me, like, what do you advise I do? I mean, my response was start looking at other jobs, frankly. But I'm not a hold back feedback sort of person, but say she wants to keep that job, right? Say she's like, I hear you, but I've only been 6 months. I want to stick out my year. Like, what would you recommend she do to get people aligned?
Well, I'm actually probably the opposite advice of you. I do tell people to stick it out, especially at the 6-month mark. If you're at a tech company, by all means, make it to 13 months. There's a reason why that's the mode of when people quit SaaS companies.
Right. There's a little bit of a waterfall there. You get some stock options. Exactly. She doesn't have any stock options because their company doesn't do that. So
she can leave a little early. But if she can reframe that, and I think any of us, when you're starting to feel like, okay, maybe we're not aligned with the company, by all means, this is your testing ground. This is your time to take on a challenge. Go try to convince, go make the case, because if nothing more, you've just learned a really important skill of storytelling and a really important skill of like, how do you up level, your organization. So I would at least give that a really amazing shot, because actually that's a really incredible opportunity, especially if you're just like, doesn't work, I'll pivot. So feels like a safe space to fail for me.
Well, I also think you learn so much with those, like in those types of environments. It's not fun, right? It can be very uncomfortable, but I think you learn so much because you can learn just as much from bad experiences, or even more from bad experiences than good experiences.
It's totally true. Yeah.
That was just on the last podcast where you said learn from other people's mistakes. So
you're a listener? You're a listener?
Oh, look at that.
Wow. Jonathan doesn't even listen to us, and he's on it, ostensibly. Like, wow. I'm blushing. I'm so happy right now. Somebody listens to us. That's amazing.
We found our one listener.
Yeah. We have one download per week. It's Jen. At least she's the CEO. Like, at least that's an honor. But I actually, my advice was two-part. My short answer was probably start looking at other jobs. And my long answer was essentially you have an opportunity. One of the things I think is really powerful for ops people earlier in their career is that at some point, and I mean, at least for me, you hit a point with a company where you're like, fuck it, I don't care if you fire me. Pardon the French. And that's a really powerful like mindset in some ways as an ops person, to think, I don't care if you fire me. I'm going to do what I think is right for the business. And if you fire me, you fire me, because it's freeing. And if I get fired for it, I'm freed. And if I don't get fired for it, I'm doing all the stuff that I know is right. And so that was actually sort of what I was like, so you have two options, like one or two. Like I typically would opt for the second one with take the fire me if you're going to fire me mindset. I'm going to do what I know is right. And
yeah. You also have an opportunity to skip level without pissing anyone off if you don't care.
Exactly.
You just believe that this person has it wrong, and you think that you're putting the company first, and this is the growth potential of the company. By all means, go to their boss.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Don't be afraid of change. I think that's one of the biggest things is people are so set in what they did 10 years ago and they don't want to change it. And I think that's the biggest hindrance to those upper level management people getting sold on a new way of doing things.
Yeah, I think it's the mindset of the playbook, right? You have definitely operators that go from company to company with their playbook in hand. And, a lot of them have a great playbook. There's nothing wrong with having a playbook that that works. But if you are doing that forever, at some point you're stagnating. And you have to be willing to create a new playbook. So
if you built your playbook at Career Builder in the early 2000s, it's stale. Well, let's just put it out there. It's pretty well gone, right? This is an awesome segue though, because Jen, you told me the last time we chatted that you have an obsession with our relationship with work, and I believe those were your exact words. I think it's fascinating because I think RevOps folks tend to have well, I know I tend to have a very unhealthy relationship with work. I know most of the ops people in the world probably do. So what are some key things that you do and have your team do at Go Nimbly to maintain a healthy relationship with work?
Yeah. So I think that at a baseline, the thing I believe in with our relationship with work is that it's broken. I think that we don't know how to focus. I think that we've forgotten that, hey, there's no real line, especially actually, I would say the opposite. We haven't forgotten. It's been right in our face the last couple of years that there isn't really a huge difference between, who you should be at work and who you are as a person. Like, I believe in showing up to work as yourself. I believe in, finding a passion so that work doesn't feel like work all the time. And I know that's not everyone's belief, but that's me. If you've ever heard of the Eames couple that made the Eames chair, they were very big on, work is life and life is work, and their home was their studio. And there's like a really beautiful story about, how they interacted with work and design. And I find them really, interesting. So, one of the things that I did is I joined a group called Cave Day, and they do focus blocks and they teach you focus. And that's one of the things that I first started getting obsessed with. And I run them at Go Nimbly. And it's literally a Zoom call. If you want another Zoom, I have another Zoom for you. But it's, organized focus time to work on things that take deep work, that take deep thought, which is almost all work. There's no such thing as multitasking. If you monotask, you'll do a much better job. I know that it is not the best. We're not really supposed to be referencing the Basecamp CEO because he's done some questionable things, but I really do love his book. So it's like, it's hard, hate the artist and, not the art. But it's this idea of, how do you create focus at work? How do you make sure that you're not distracted? How do you teach your company to do that? And so I run these cave days where we put our phones away, we turn off Slack, we turn off iMessage. You can even take your clock off your watch and you work on one thing. And when you get distracted, you learn the skill, because this is what people can give up when they get distracted. There's a skill in getting back to focus. And that is a true skill. And you have to relearn that because we've lost it. And I promise you, as an operator, when you have a ton of work and it feels like it's never ending and you're pulling these long days, you might still pull those, but I promise you, you'll get way more done with focus than without. So you might answer more pings, you might answer, more erratic emails, but you're not getting the same amount of work done than if you just truly focus. And I think that's one of our competitive advantages. We can get more done in 4 hours than an internal team can. And a lot of that is our frameworks, and a lot of that is our focus.
That's awesome. How often do you run them?
A couple times a week. And other people
a couple
run
times
them
a week?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
And other people run their own teams. So like even within a team, they might just say, hey, let's do a cave. So it's, sprinkled throughout the organization. Some weeks I'm better about it. There's some weeks I don't, right? It's like based on my schedule and sometimes when I need it. But yeah, I also join, I have a habit challenge with Cave Day where for 30 minutes a day, all I do is delegate, because I know that's a skill that I need to be better at. So literally it's like I look at my to-do list and I just delegate for half an hour. Again, like teaching myself how to work, not just like the work that I do, but how I work.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's very smart.
Jonathan's going to hate it. I am absolutely going to start doing delegating for 30 minutes every day. But it's such a hard thing to...
I'll give this one to Jonathan.
Yeah.
I mean, and Matt and any of my other 5 people.
Okay.
Yeah. I do have about 9 direct reports now. So I got people to send things down to.
Your minions.
Yeah, I can't. I'm actually. I when you first told me about Cave Days, like it's an incredible thing. I think it's. I want to do them. Obviously, I think we need to get some company buy-in to do such things, but we're going to.
Maybe.
But we're going to. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yes, please do. Actually, please do. But I was actually thinking it would be like a once-a-month thing. I didn't realize the frequency with which you were doing them. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's deep work to be doing all the time, right? So as much as you can put things away, focus on one thing, the better.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And so you mentioned one book in there, which is by the author of Basecamp. We'll link that for everybody, or by the founder of Basecamp.
Thank you for my name, recommended by Jen Igartua.
Jen's favorite books and people is what we'll label it, just so that everybody knows you're a huge fan.
Written by Jen's idol.
But when it comes to so I think that's great. But when it comes to, you talked about like learning how to refocus, right, as an art, and like not multitasking, monotasking, also very, very important to your point. Like, multitasking is a fiction, right? What any books or like readings you'd recommend for people around like relearning how to focus, learning how to monotask?
I think the one to go to is The One Thing, which is if you want to, elevate as a person, you focus on one thing, you find out what your goal is, and you do the thing that helps you reach that goal or makes other tasks no longer necessary because you've done the one big task. That is a book that not only do I do to just focus, like I'm only working on one thing at a time. I do it from a professional development standpoint. So like I'm personally growing right now in delegation. So like I know that that's the one thing that if I nail, a lot of other things are going to come into play. So I'm focused only on that. And then I do that when I coach and do reviews. So if you have a review done by me, I'll go with all your successes. I'm not going to come and tell you all the things you should work on. I'm going to really think about where I think your next career jump is and tell you what the one thing I think you need to work on to get there is, because you're going to hit that much faster, even if you've got 3 other things in the backlog to do. If I tell you to be a better storyteller and also get technically better and, better time management, you're not going to be able to do all those things. So I'm better off saying, for you to be elevated to the next level, you need to really nail storytelling. Here's some resources to do that.
Totally. I love that. I mean, go ahead.
I was just saying that there's another book out there too, called Deep Work, that I think
I want to go back to Jen's point because she provides value to our listeners. And
okay, I got it. I see how it is.
Deep Work is a wonderful book. Yes, it is. We'll add that in the link as well, Brandon. Brandon likes to recommend a book every week. The audience needs to know. But Jen, I just want to say I love the idea of using something like The One Thing, both from my learning how to monofocus and do things, to also a management standpoint, because it's demotivating to get like, here's the 4 things you need to do in order to get promoted, right? Like, okay, great. Which one's the highest priority? I have no idea. I need to be able to prioritize my day, my career development, all of those things. And if the list is 7 things long, I'm going to start looking for other jobs before I figure out what are those 7 things to do, right? And
or you're attempting all of them, slightly better at all of them, which no one's going to notice. So
right,
jack of all trades approach.
Yeah, which, by the way, that saying is, you go read the actual saying. Jack of all trades is actually honored in the saying, and people have bastardized that for like 100 years. But Jack of all trades is actually a good saying. But
but
like Jack of all trades, master of none.
Often better.
It's still often better than a master of one. Yeah,
master of one. Yeah,
true.
Yeah, that's the end of the. People have ruined it forever. But whatever. That's. Anyways, we're not talking about etymology of phrases at this podcast today.
We're all over the place.
We're not mono focused right now. We're not
exactly.
Very well. All right, so I'm going to segue this a little bit because we haven't segued enough today. So most of our guests have done RevOps at a few companies, right? Like I've done it at a handful of companies that I've worked at. None of our guests so far have consulted businesses at the scale that you have. So it would sort of be remiss, because we typically ask people to share, like, what's a great RevOps story that you can share with us? If we didn't ask you to share, like, what are some examples of awesome projects you've done with customers that you can tell us about?
Ooh, like actual work streams? For sure. So I think the biggest thing when we're actually implementing, like if we are an extension of a revenue operations team, like if we're implementing a revenue operations team, we're looking at skill gaps, we're figuring out if to structure the company by departments or by functions. That's typically by your, early stage. You can do your more functional, marketing, sales, customer success operations, like individuals focus on those things. Later on, you're going to go more in depth. But if we're in there doing the work, the biggest thing that we want to do is identify a gap first. I think that's another point of maturity for our customers is if you are coming to the table by saying, hey, we've identified a gap in our funnel and our buying experience and our metrics, and now we've got, work to do. That's, typically a big green checkbox to, okay, you're pretty mature. You're prioritizing work. You actually have a framework for that. And that's when the work is, for me, most fulfilling. But the work runs gamuts. Like we're doing a lot of product-led growth work right now, a lot of, PQL processes, making sure, again, breaking down data silos. We talked about it not being malice. But a lot of the times when we talk about information hoarding, it's like it's a really intense term to say like a company has information hoarding, but a lot of it is like they don't have access. There's a little story from a company, I would say they're at like Series C. The C level has just stopped selling, and you've got a big scaling. So stop being the only primary seller. You should always be selling. But they're in a place right now where, wondering like why are they having this kind of conversation? Why didn't they look in the product and take a look at their usage and then go and have the conversation, especially for like a freemium model? And, the answer was, well, your AEs don't have access to product. So like they're not researching the customer first because they don't have that product data. You used to go in, pull reports, see everything and have like super compelling conversations, but like they don't have that. So a lot of the work that we do is, product to Salesforce integration, getting the data into the AEs and the seller's hands, elevating, that. And then also for marketing and for CS, but for marketing, do you have the right account lifecycle events that are happening that you can customize your, marketing for? So a lot of it is really rolling back up to, is the data flowing, everywhere, and are people actually, using it for really compelling ways? And those are the really interesting projects, which is, oh, wow, we created 10% more upsell opportunities by giving people usage. Those are the ones that are very fun.
We see that everywhere too, just data silos all over the place. And I think it's not malice, but it may be a little bit of ignorance, because I think a lot of people, they're concerned with the data for their own use, but they don't really understand how it's going to apply to the other parts of the business. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of the, if you think about silo syndrome, one of the telltale ways is like information hoarding is the primary one. And when you dive even deeper on that, a lot of it is sharing insights with other relevant teams. And that's actually one place that people don't do. It's like you find this gem, you're like, oh, wow, users that do X, do Y, but it stays within your silo. And so we're not practiced. And I do believe that that's a practice. We're not practiced culturally, and then we don't create the systems. And I don't mean technology, I mean like culture systems. We don't create the systems where is there a meeting every week where we share interesting insights, or even as simple as a Slack channel that says cool things we know about our customers. Like it doesn't have to be boil the ocean. We don't have to create, round tables for everything. But we need both the cultural piece, which is wanting to share it, having a culture of doing that. And then do we need systems in order to do that? Every problem is either solved by cultural or a system. You got to decide which one.
Totally. I mean, it's sometimes for us, I think, at least for me, it's a combination of both, right? You have to have both of those things, the systems to connect the two. And one of the things that I think is often missed and is really powerful is just explaining the why. If we want to talk about connecting product data to our CRM so the sales team can use it, a lot of times your product team won't understand the why that's valuable. And just sharing that information, like, hey, getting the seat data, the usage data, all this stuff in is going to help me identify 10% more upsells, right? And you guys want product adoption. We want product adoption. Like, we're on the same page here. This is going to help us drive that, right? And just because a lot of people in product have never sold, they wouldn't even think about that being helpful in the sales process. Just like I would know nothing about, what would be helpful in engineering a product necessarily. And in creating that culture is the first step for sure. I love that.
I think also creating kind of an architecture, like a data architecture, so it comes together in people's minds, because I think they don't really understand it until you can kind of put together like a drawing or a draw.io diagram of how all this data works together to become kind of one cohesive element. And I think when you can do that, it becomes a lot more powerful.
Yeah, that's actually a tactic we use a lot to unite teams. Is like we do a lot of workshops. It's like, let's just draw it out. Let's go from lead capture all the way to opportunity close and all the way through renewal. And let's like literally just go through and draw out what's happening. We pause at each funnel stage and go like, where is there pain for the customer? Like, where do we know that there's gaps? What do we have hypotheses that there's things wrong about that we don't know? And just take through that. And that's like one, it helps us understand. Like there's a little perk for us doing these kinds of things. The feedback that we get a lot is like, oh, wow, our team hasn't gotten together like that in a long time. Or we have never had a meeting like that. Or I had no idea that marketing ops was so complex. Or, and you get this. And that category in design thinking is unknown unknowns. It's sort of like what you don't know, you don't know. And the only way that you get through that is like general discovery. Like there's no sitting and just brainstorming what you don't know. it's like doing exercises, like have someone just map things out, ask a lot of questions, and those things will elevate.
Totally. I love that. I know we're running up on time. Actually, we could probably talk about a lot of this stuff for a while. So I want to push this forward. John, and I want to back up to one quick thing. You did say like marketing ops is not that complicated. Sarcastically, I kind of think the sarcasm was unnecessary. Jonathan does it, so I assume everybody can do it. But anyways, so Jen, you've had an awesome career. I follow your content. I think it's awesome. I think our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of this. We get a ton of listeners that are sort of like early on in their ops career, right? They're trying to figure out some of these things. Building leadership is hard. Developing professionally is hard, especially when you're in your early career. Any advice you'd give to people how to develop personally and professionally? What helped you?
General. I don't want to give you a cliche answer, so I'm gonna double down on RevOps.
Live, laugh, love, Jen. Live, laugh, love. Come on.
Life's a garden. Dig it.
Questions, like all that stuff is true. I think you get that a lot. I think, I think the generalist mindset at the beginning is definitely something to keep in mind. It's not time to double down on one thing or another. It's not just time for you to be curious and figure out what you want, but honestly, you just don't have the depth early in your career to be a specialist. You won't have it. Don't go into those types of roles because you're going to be bad at them for a while. Find a company that lets you be a generalist and that lets you learn a lot of things, because that's what you can do and that's where you can make impact when you're early on. And then later, follow your passion, figure out what you're actually good at, go the deeper route. But you're kind of, if you're very, very early on here, just learn about everything and throw yourself at the kind of problems that can be solved by a generalist. That would be my advice.
Yeah, it's sort of like it goes back to almost like you don't know what you don't know, right? If you take a specialist job early, you won't know like if you like something else better because you haven't been exposed to those other things. And so I love that concept. I'm gonna push you on this a little bit because you've talked to me multiple times about improv helping you out in your career, and I want to hear about that because I think that's fascinating.
I could have done that. Yeah, so I started doing improv about, I think I might be like 8 years or so in, which I'm not good enough to have been doing improv for 8 years, but alas. And it actually started making me have a lot more fun. Again, my relationship with work, because I started applying the things that it takes to be really great on an improv team and a really great improv partner into work. Which, yes, we've all heard yes and that's absolutely way more fun to brainstorm with yes and. But if you go on stage and you just yes and, improv's still pretty terrible. There's a lot more. So they're supporting your scene partner. So one of the big things that you have to do is you're not there to make a punchline. You are supporting your scene partner all along the way, even if that means that you're a background, person on a scene. So that was like, for somebody that's very extroverted and loves attention, that was a big learn for me, that it's fine to stay in the background and let somebody else, succeed. Active listening. So I think that I had been told a lot to be a better active listener. It wasn't until improv where it's like literally a nightmare if you miss a detail. So if I start a scene with Jordan and he's my brother, and then 20 minutes later he asks me out, it's gonna be weird, right? Like it's gonna be like,
not in Kentucky.
Wow.
So like it can have like a really bad effect if you're just not, active listening. And then the last one I really love is just group wins. There's no one winner in improv. Like you could have been the person with the punchline, but you couldn't have done it alone. That's stand up. Go do a different, type of comedy. But if you had a great show, it's everyone. It's the person in the background that was like pretending to be in the grocery store that made the scene look great. And so, that's really important, especially when you're building a team or in consulting. Like we don't have our own wins a lot. We're implementing amazing things for our customers. So how do you make sure that it's always a team win and that you're still celebrating wins? I think that let me show up as a different person because I am an achiever and I am very competitive, and I had to have something that like shocked me into changing, and that was improv.
That's amazing. I love that. I would never have thought of improv as helping listening skills, but the way you described that was actually like, yeah, absolutely, that would increase your listening skills. It would have to, right? But it's not like the thing that would have stood out to me first and foremost with improv, right? Fascinating. And then with the By the way, I did stand up for 5 years, so thanks for the minor shout out / insult there. I haven't learned how to be a background character yet. I was always the main character is basically what we're implying there. But it is super helpful. I credit a lot of my career development back to stand-up comedy alone. And for what it's worth, we actually just in October had an on-site with about 30 people from our company, and we brought in the Groundlings, which is, for anybody listening, probably like the most famous improv group in the US. And two of them led us through, sort of like one-on-one and group exercises for multiple hours. And it was amazing. Like it was so helpful for team development, and the lessons they brought was extremely valuable. So I can see what you're talking about. It's super interesting.
Yeah. And you laugh a lot.
And it kind of takes your guard down too. It seems like you're willing to take chances and not take yourself too seriously, and applying that everywhere in life is probably a great thing to do.
So Jen, where can our audience see you perform?
Ooh, that's really interesting. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do improv for a little bit, because I just booked myself a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires, and I leave on Tuesday.
Okay.
Wow. Whoa. All right.
So
wow. Okay.
I did look up improv in Buenos Aires, but I have not signed up to anything yet.
How long are you going for?
It's a one-way ticket, so
ever
up to 90 days without a visa. I think I'm a 1 to 2 month kind of girl. I grew up in Spain. I grew up in Madrid, and so I am fluent in Spanish, but I'm finding myself losing it. Like there's a little bit of muscle memory that goes with language, and I'm finding myself not remembering words, and it's making me terribly sad. And I would go back to Spain, but the time zone is insane. But Buenos Aires is 2 hours before New York. Or after New York, so I can definitely just work there a little bit later and not have it really impact much. So that's where you'll find me.
Sounds amazing.
Wow, you will be there when this podcast comes out. So everybody, when you listen to this, Jen is in Buenos Aires right now, just doing Buenos Aires things, and you can't see her do improv. Is the end of the moral of that story. When she comes back, we'll let everybody know where to see her do improv. All right. That's amazing. Congrats. I mean, a month in Buenos Aires, I am massively jealous. Not mildly, massively, 1,000%.
I'm a little nervous, so I'm glad for the hype.
Yeah, you're going to love it. It's going to be amazing. I mean, nothing to be nervous about. You also speak Spanish. I mean, I spent a couple months in Costa Rica at one point, and I did not speak Spanish. So you'll be a step up for sure. All right. So we have to segue now. I know we're running out of time. So I'm going to quickly take us to the last thing that we do every week, and that is This Week on LinkedIn. This is the first time ever, aside from the twice, I guess, that I made Brandon and Jonathan bring one for an Office Hours episode, that somebody else brought a This Week on LinkedIn question. And it's Jen. Jen brought her own This Week on LinkedIn question.
First guest to bring one, yeah.
Right, first guest to bring one. Wow, I mean, she's a listener. She's an active listener. Anybody knows I just fist pounded in the air. I was purely excited about that. Let's go. All right, so the question that Jen brought is, if the North Star is the customer, if North Star of RevOps is the customer, how do you handle internal pressure to treat your internal stakeholders as a customer? Which is, a saying we hear people all the time. If you're in operations, your sales team is the customer, right? So how do you handle that? And Jen, let's start with you.
Totally. So for me, I think the boldness in my response, which I know creates maybe a little bit of friction, is that they're not your customer. And I think that's really clear to me. We can come up with other very important words like stakeholder or user, but your customer is your customer. And I think that it's really important for a business to make sure that we're valuing that all together in the same way, whether it's your product team, your sales team, your RevOps team. All of us are trying to create a really incredible experience that's frictionless for our customer in order to increase their LTV. Like that's the goal. And I think it does muddy the waters when we start thinking about our go-to-market team as our customer, because we should be prioritizing what's important for our ultimate customer. Again, this is maybe an unpopular way of saying it, but I don't really care if your job is hard. Not if it's not if it's not affecting the customer. I don't care that it's I'm never going to take on a project that goes, this is 4 clicks, it should be 2. Like, why? Is it because the customer's feeling that? Is it taking so long? Are there so many errors that, the customer proposal is wrong? Or is it just a baseline productivity thing? I care about UI. I care about, that our sales team has an easy time implementing things, but I'm never going to prioritize that friction over my customers' friction. And I think the language is important.
Totally agree. So I mean, to summarize, like I just sound up. I absolutely agree with that. I think it does muddy the waters, right? The focus of RevOps is the customer's experience at the end of the day. So if I muddy that water, then it leaves room to argue that I should be doing more stuff internally than externally, and then I'm becoming super tactical. Like at the end of the day, most internal stuff like that is like, yeah, like you said, I'm doing 4 clicks to disqualify this lead instead of 2. Like, okay, I don't care. Like just okay, make 4 clicks. Like, is there a thing you need from me, or is this that hard? Do we need help? But yeah, so I love the idea. So how do you treat it? Is like customer 1, customer 2? Like what would you just customer versus how do you treat it?
So I think that our go-to-market team is a lot of intel on our customers. So it's not that they're not important stakeholders. I do rep rides a lot. Like I think rep rides are really, really telling. One, to understand the true pains, that are going on. Are there processes that are just absolutely terrible that are, really hurting maybe the carry capacity of our team? I care about that. There are things that, your sales team will tell you that are really important. And I believe in doing rep rides, but I do think about them as our go-to-market team, as the users of our infrastructure and our technology. I just don't think about them as my customer. And I think when you do, that's when you start listening to the loudest voice. That's when you start prioritizing because, your VP of sales is very loud and tells you all the time what you should be doing. And so you do it. The VP of sales is my stakeholder. They're not my customer. And so I care about a tightness and making sure that our strategies are the same, that I understand where we're going and that I'm a partner in that. But I keep those lines really rigid.
And I think those keywords you use, partner and team, when you start saying customer or client, that's detracting from becoming a solid team.
Yeah. And I think it brings us back to another time, like when it was very much like, IT and biz operations, although I know business operations is changing in its own way. But when you bring it back to that, it really was, tell me what you need, we'll do it. Like it was a function internally to help, your internal team. And we're shifting that, which is letting our teams, elevate, and it's letting us have that seat at the revenue table. If I can add on one more live, love, laugh sign, I don't want to take that. Like I don't want anyone to take that back. And if I start being ticket taker, and if I start prioritizing you over the customer, I'm less strategic, and I'm going to guard that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you know what happened to IT teams that treated their internal stakeholders as customers in the 90s and 2000s, right? They got outsourced and then they didn't have jobs anymore, right? They were ticket takers. That still happens. Yeah. Don't be that person. Be a strategic partner and help move the needle forward. Be a team member, essentially, right? I love that. Brandon, Jonathan, anything you want to add to that question?
No, I think nailed it. I couldn't agree more.
Your one contribution today. Thank you for that. Super helpful.
Mic drop.
Guys, well, he's complimenting you, all right? You don't have to stand up for him all the time. Brandon, did you have words to say today, or are we just gonna...
No, I'm just along for the ride today. All
right. Cool. Nothing? You don't want anything? We're going to leave it at that?
No, I mean, I of course have some strong feelings about everything, but I actually did used to think I have multiple customers on this. It's my sales team, or anything that I'm doing. It's my sales team, but also my boss, but also the customer itself. And then when you start to do that, you do lose sight of what is the real priority. Right. So I did used to do that myself. I've been guilty of that before. But I think Jen's point is really good. Also because otherwise now all of a sudden you're there just to make sales happy, and now you're just responding to their requests. That's not how marketing should be done, right?
You're also creating more silos by doing that, right? Loudest voice will get more work, which creates more silos.
Yeah, exactly. We are the RevOps professionals here, right? Like we can take their...
two of us are.
Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah.
Jen, you're one of the two, don't worry.
Whoa. But it's like...
Well, we should do a RevOps off, and each of you goes through a variety of challenges, and we see who wins.
Sounds like next week we got our episode.
Man, that would be laughably bad. You guys ever seen the New England Patriots play a Pee Wee football team?
Nice, yeah. But my point is that like there's a reason that we are running RevOps, right? There's a reason that I do marketing. There's a reason that the salesperson is doing sales, right? I'm not going to go to sales and say, hey, did you ever try this methodology? Or did you ever think about asking this qualifying question? It's like, yeah, of course I tried that. Like, I'm the professional. They would laugh at us, right? But on the other side of that, we get that all the time from them, right? Mm-hmm. So again, we're the professionals. We'll take their voice into consideration, but I'm not going to change my job, change everything. I'm not going to fold to them because they have a strong voice, because they are that squeaky wheel, you know?
Mm-hmm. And it's setting a precedent of being, treating each other poorly and treating each other like pawns instead of partners.
That's very true too.
Yeah, I think it's like responding versus reacting. Like if somebody is giving me like, this is bad, or you should prioritize X. I think our job, taking the rep rides example is, I'm going to get 20 things from each person. But if every single person out of my 10 reps says the same thing, that the same thing is painful across all of them, I'm going to listen. I'm going to see that thing. One, because look, I still think they're important stakeholders. I still think it's important to have a tight relationship. I don't call them my customers, but like I understand the power that the go-to-market team has and how important it is for me to make them effective. That if 10 of them hate something that's going to take me 4 hours to fix, by all means, I'm going to fix that thing and I'm going to be the hero. Yeah. Like I'm teaching that I, implement things. I'm just going to be thoughtful when it comes to, the big ticket items. And so I think it's, our job is to listen, but it's to collect things, validate that there's gaps, look at metrics, talk to customers, figuring out if there's really something there, and then we can do it. But I'm never going to respond or like react to somebody pinging me being like, hey, this is broken. I'm like, all right, I'm going to validate that before I just like drop everything and start fixing things.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Totally. I look at it and I just say, hey, ping Jonathan, he'll fix it. Anyways, I love the answer. I actually don't do that. I never do that. Just so
right.
But I love the answer. I know we have run long on our episode. This might be our longest episode. So Jen, it was awesome to have you. Thanks for giving us a bit of extra time. No, it's great. There's so many actionable takeaways. By the way, we're going to implement Cave Days here. We're absolutely going to do it. There's so many good takeaways in this. So thank you, Jen, for joining us. Everybody who's listening, thank you for sticking it out. If you enjoyed us and you're still listening at this point, I assume you do, give us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. Please follow Jen and Go Nimbly on LinkedIn. We'll put the bios in the podcast description for you. Those are words. Those are words. They're very hard. It's an hour in. Hosting is hard, y'all. It's really hard. Follow myself and Brandon on LinkedIn. Jonathan still doesn't post, so just ignore him altogether. And everybody send Jen a congrats on being in Buenos Aires notes when this airs, because she will be enjoying the good life. So thank you for joining us, Jen. And we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, you forgot one thing.
What did I forget?
You have to say live, love, laugh.
You didn't even get the order right. I think it's live, laugh, love, isn't it? Pretty sure love is at the end.
Not the way I do it.
You live, love, and then laugh. In that order specifically. I got it. Oh, and everybody, go buy Pillbox Games. What was the name of this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and if you, oh my gosh, you said the F word earlier, so I can say something weird, right?
You can be weird. We're fine.
If you go on pillboxgames.com and you buy side effects, if you use the promo code PROMOCHODE, you get a discount.
PROMOCHODE, okay.
Nobody Google that word because it's problematic. But yes, you could say weird things. By the way, the only person who gets upset at us for saying weird things in the podcast is Jonathan's mom. Actually sent us a note. So that was a fun day.
She'll be okay with that one.
But yes, go to Pillbox Games, buy the game, use the promo code that I'm not going to say, and thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jen, for joining us. See you everybody next week.
Bye.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.